Rent gone up, or maybe you're a landlord. Are you worried there will be another interest rate after tomorrow's Reserve Bank meeting and the rent you get won't cover your new mortgage payments? Greens Lord Mayoral candidate Jonathan Sri Ranganathan is here to officially announce a new housing policy that will charge landlords higher rates if they raise rents. Jonathan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Is that controversial?
Well, actually, it's very popular with the vast majority of renters who are struggling to afford a home. And even actually a lot of owner-occupiers like, well, yeah, look, I'm worried about how my kids are going to afford a place. I can see that homelessness is a problem. And we know that we're not going to get on top of rising homelessness as long as rents keep rising. And this policy is actually quite measured when you think about it, because we're simply saying rents have already risen enough, where they've gone through the roof in recent years. Since 2021 in Brisbane, asking rents have increased by 45%. So say a two-bedroom unit was previously renting for $400 a week is now going for almost $600 a week. It's a phenomenal increase that's having a negative flow-on impacts to the rest of the economy. So small businesses are reporting downturns in discretionary spending because renters don't have enough money. Surprise, surprise. So what we're suggesting is that if landlords put the rent up, we would put their rates up. And that's essentially an emergency response to the current housing crisis. You could call it a rent freeze. The idea is that we would try this for 2 years and see if house prices and rents stabilize and respond accordingly as the situation develops. But it starts with the recognition that we are in perhaps the worst housing crisis in living memory, and we need to take swift action. And unfortunately, state and federal governments haven't been doing enough on this issue.
You're talking about a 650% increase in rates.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite scary. So I've got some figures here that says for a unit in the CBD rented for $750 a week with a rates bill of $1,500 a year, the owner would make an extra $2,600 a year by raising the rent $50 a week. But they would then have to pay $9,750 in rates.
That's right. And the idea here is that hopefully most landlords won't put the rent up. This is actually a very easy rate rise to avoid, because all you have to do to avoid paying the high rates is not put your rent up. And so I think obviously it's a big number. It sounds quite sensational. People say, oh, that sounds like a big rate rise. But it's not really, because it's an optional fee. It's only if you put the rent up. And right now rents are plenty high enough. And there are lots of tenants out there who are really struggling to make ends meet, struggling to put food on the table, struggling to cover their bills. And the more rents rise, the worse that's going to get. So we need to do something. And this is the best option at the moment, is an emergency rent freeze to cool things down and let people get back on their feet.
You know, when you say that, it makes me think that you're demonising landlords, that they're actually just putting the rent up to make money on top, like a profit. Maybe they're putting the rent up so that they can pay the mortgage that they have on that property.
Well, yeah, often they are, right? But why should tenants have to buy houses for landlords? Like that doesn't seem fair. That, let's say I'm a tenant, I'm working really hard, saving up for a house, also paying rent. Why should I have to buy my landlord a house? And this is the problem with the treatment of housing as a commodity. We're not blaming individual landlords. We're not saying landlords are bad people, but we have a taxation system and a housing system that for decades has encouraged people to invest in property. And that's been to the long-term detriment of all of us. We all suffer as a result of rising homelessness and rising rents. So if landlords are struggling to cover the costs of rising mortgages, then the answer is that they should sell. They should sell those investment properties, and renters who are struggling to buy their first home will finally be able to have a chance to get into the market.
But will they?
Certainly, there are many renters who have been saving deposits for years and are trying to get into the market, but they keep getting out-competed at auctions and at sales by investors who have more assets, more wealth, more leverage, so that they are continually outbidding them. If we can discourage property investors from hoarding investment properties, that allows more people to buy their own home. And it is in the best interest of society long-term to discourage the treatment of housing as a commodity. Housing shouldn't be a way to make profit. It should be a basic human right.
Dave has sent in a text message and he says, a rates hike will just make investors sell their properties. As a renter, thanks for making the situation worse. He doesn't agree.
Well, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who will feel nervous about this idea, because there has been so much propaganda from the real estate industry and the property development industry saying this is a bad idea. The companies and industries that benefit the most from rising rents are saying that they're opposed to this. And that's a sign that actually it would put downward pressure on rents. So if some investors sell, they will either sell to other landlords who will keep renting those properties out, or they would sell to renters who become first home buyers. So it's not like when a landlord sells, the house or unit suddenly disappears. The property remains there. Someone will still end up living in it. So it's simply allowing those middle-class renters who are struggling to buy a home to get into the market, which takes more pressure off the rental market overall.
Isn't that assuming that house prices are going to come down to a level that renters will have enough deposit to buy?
Well, if enough landlords sell, then they would.
You think there'd be more supply, but wouldn't that just mean that more investors would buy?
Well, if more investors buy, then they're going to keep renting out the properties. So either another investor buys and keeps renting it out, in which case there's no impact to the supply of rental, or a tenant buys a property, in which case they're no longer a tenant competing for other rentals. So there's no net change in the supply of housing. It's simply reducing that profit incentive and saying to landlords, look, you can keep being a landlord, just keep your rents reasonable. They've gone up enough already.
A couple more callers have come in. They're just text messages at the moment, which is 0467922612. Our phone line number is 1300 222 612. Leanne from Boondall says, how about a carrot instead of a stick? What if landlords could get a reduction in their rates for signing a 5-year or 10-year lease? So that's flipping it from what you're saying. What would you be open to that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of semantics, right? Because what we're saying is, if you put your rates up, if you put your rent up, we will put your rates up. But you could easily characterize that as saying, if you don't put your rent up, we won't put your rates up. So
or you would decrease your rates.
I don't think we need to be doing that. I think actually landlords are making profits at the moment. We've heard of many situations where landlords are increasing their rents far above any increase to mortgage payments, far above any increase to other ongoing expenses.
So you're saying that it's price gouging, essentially?
Yes, and if landlords feel that they can't make enough of a profit for it to be justified, for their investment to be justified, then they should sell and put their money into small business or put their money into some other sector of the economy. It is not economically productive for so much investment money to be locked up in housing. We need housing to be treated as a human right, and we need money to be flowing through the economy rather than flowing into the pockets of big property investors.
Another text message here, anonymous one, says, ask Jono, where is the detailed research on rent freezes? How would it work in Australia? There's been 2 years. Where's the detailed policy paper on how it would work?
Actually, the Greens have released quite a bit of policy detail, which is reasonably easy to search online. If you want more detail about this proposal for Brisbane City Council, you can go to jonathansree.com/rent freeze. But it's important to remember that there are many jurisdictions around the world that have had different forms of rent control or rent caps for a long, long time, and there's ample research available to show that they're a good thing. What we do see is sometimes the property industry and certain industry groups share around articles from the US pointing to one-off examples of rent control schemes that haven't worked very well. The difference with this one, and the difference with a lot of European rent control schemes, is that it applies to the property, not to the tenancy. So in the US, there are some areas where if you kick out your tenant, you can get a new tenant in and put up the rent. But we're saying that the rent freeze should apply to the property. So even if you get a new tenant in, you can't put the rent up.
For 2 years?
Yeah, so that's a big difference between some of the schemes that some of the research from the US refers to. But it's important to remember that there are dozens, if not hundreds of jurisdictions that have had rent controls or rent caps for a very long time now. And the populace has maintained them because they are good at keeping rents low. And that's ultimately what we'd want to do here. We want to put downward pressure on house prices and rents. The Greens are the only party that wants rents and house prices to get cheaper. And that's what we're talking about at the City Council election.
Good luck with that.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. That's Jonathan.